There's a difference between the Marcus Aurelius who became emperor at 40 and the Marcus Aurelius who wrote the final pages of the Meditations at 58. Not in what he knew, in what he was. The early Meditations have an urgency to them. He is fighting his inner enemies, building the gap, constructing the citadel, reminding himself repeatedly who he wants to be. The final pages are different. The fighting is gone, not because the difficulty disappeared, because he no longer needed to fight to be himself. He had become himself. In the final pages of the Meditations, the ones almost nobody discusses, describe what that feels like from the inside, not as a philosophical argument, as a lived experience. Today, in the final episode of the Marcus Aurelius Code, I'm going to walk you through those final pages and show you what genuine transformation actually feels like. Not what it looks like from the outside, what it feels like from the inside. And then I'm going to show you something about yourself, about who you have become across these 10 episodes that you may not have fully seen yet. This is episode 10, the transformation, the final episode of season 1, and the one that makes everything else real. If you have been watching this series, thank you. 10 episodes is a commitment, and you made it. Subscribe now if you have not, and turn on the bell, because season 2 of the Marcus Aurelius Code is coming, and you do not want to start from zero when it does. Now, let us finish what we started 10 episodes ago. Welcome back to Memento Sapiens, Ancient Wisdom for the Modern Mind. Episode 10 of the Marcus Aurelius Code, the final episode of Season 1. 10 weeks ago, we began with a question. What would it look like to respond to life the way Marcus Aurelius did? Today, after the gap, the inner enemies, the inner citadel, the betrayal protocol, the collapsed system, the toxic defense, the respect code, the architecture of confidence, and the legacy of presence. We answer that question from the inside, not theoretically, as something you have been building, whether you realized it or not. Let us finish this. Part 1. What genuine transformation actually is, and why it feels completely different from improvement. Most people confuse transformation with improvement. Improvement is linear. You are doing something at a level of 6. Now you're doing it at a level of 7, then 8. Measurable, visible, trackable. Improvement is valuable, important, necessary. But transformation is different in a way that is almost impossible to describe until you have experienced it. Improvement changes what you do. Transformation changes what you are. And the difference between those two, between doing something better and being something different, is the difference between practicing the Stoic philosophy and being changed by it. Marcus Aurelius understood this distinction with unusual clarity. The early Meditations are full of improvement. He is getting better at equanimity, better at maintaining the observer position, better at applying the gap between stimulus and response. Better, better, better. And then, somewhere in the middle years, something shifts. It is subtle, hard to pinpoint in a single entry, but the quality of the writing changes. The urgency softens. The reminders become less frequent. Not because he stopped needing them, because he needed them less. Because what had been practice was becoming nature. What had been effort was becoming default. What had been something he did was becoming something he was. That shift from doing to being is the territory of transformation. And it cannot be forced. It cannot be scheduled. It cannot be accomplished through more effort or better systems. It arrives as a consequence of consistent practice over time. Like the moment you realize you are reading in a language you were once translating. One day, you are no longer translating. You are simply reading. The gap is there without you creating it. The observer position is available without you assuming it. The values are present without you consulting them. Because you are no longer performing Stoicism. You are living it. Part 2. The 5 signs that transformation is already happening. Signs you may have been dismissing as ordinary. Marcus Aurelius documented across multiple late Meditations entries. what the experience of genuine transformation feels like from the inside. Not the dramatic version, the quiet, ordinary, easily missed version. Here are the 5 signs he described. Sign 1. Reactions arrive later. Not that you no longer have reactions, that there is a measurable delay between the trigger and the reaction that was not there before. You notice yourself catching something, a frustration, an anxiety, an impulse, slightly before it would have landed in the past. Not always, not perfectly, but more often than before. If this has been happening, that is not a coincidence. That is the gap from episode 1, built into your nervous system. Sign 2. You choose who you are more often than you react into who you were. There are moments, quiet, uncelebrated, where you behave differently than the version of yourself you were a year ago would have behaved. Not dramatically differently. You say the more honest thing instead of the comfortable one. You pause where you used to react. You choose the harder but more aligned action. These moments do not feel like victories. They feel like ordinary decisions. That ordinariness, the absence of effort where there was once effort, is the sign. Sign 3. Toxic behavior lands differently. Not that it does not land, that it lands and then passes through instead of sticking. The person who once could derail your day now produces a clear observation. That is their behavior, not evidence about my worth. And then the day continues. The classification from episode 6, operating automatically. Sign 4. Silence is more available. The inner noise, the judgment, the comparison, the catastrophizing is quieter. Not absent, quieter. There are moments of genuine internal quiet where there used to be constant commentary. And in those moments, you can hear yourself more clearly. Sign 5. You return to yourself faster. After a failure, after a difficult interaction, after a day where you were not who you wanted to be, the return to your values takes less time than it used to. Not because the failures are smaller, because the path back is more familiar. You know the 4 steps from episode 8. You have walked that path enough times that it is no longer unfamiliar territory. If any of these 5 signs are present in your life, and they are if you have been doing this work, then the transformation is not coming. It is already underway. Part 3. The final pages of the Meditations. What Marcus Aurelius wrote when he had become what he had been trying to be. The Meditations are divided into 12 books. The final book, Book 12, is different from everything that came before. The tone changes. The urgency of the early books, do this, remember this, practice this, gives way to something quieter. Something that sounds less like self-instruction and more like self-recognition. He writes in the final entries, you have the power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He had written versions of this throughout the Meditations. But in the early books, he wrote it as a reminder, as something he needed to tell himself because he kept forgetting. In Book 12, he writes it as a fact, as something he no longer needs to be told, as someone reporting on what is true, rather than someone instructing themselves on what should be true. He writes, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Again, he had written variations of this for years. But in the final entries, the phrasing changes subtly. It is no longer try to make your thoughts better. It is the settled observation of someone who has spent 20 years watching the relationship between thought quality and life quality, and has simply arrived at the conclusion, without drama, without triumph, as a matter of fact. And then, in what historians believe may be one of his very final entries, he writes something that has no parallel anywhere else in the Meditations. If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. 7 words, then 5 more. In the early Meditations, this was an aspiration, a standard he was trying to hold himself to. In Book 12, it is something else entirely. It is a description of who he has become, not of who he is trying to be, of who he is. And that shift from aspiration to description, from trying to being, is the only way I know how to define transformation. The moment when the standard is no longer something you hold yourself to. It is something you simply are. That moment does not arrive all at once. It arrives in small recognitions, small moments of noticing, I'm doing this without trying. And then more of them, and then more, until one day, not dramatically, not with fanfare, you realize that the person you were trying to become is the person you have been for a while now. You just had not fully recognized them yet. We're almost at the end of 10 episodes together. And if any of what you just heard felt familiar, if any of those 5 signs are present in your life, then you have been building something real. And the best thing you can do for that work right now is subscribe. Hit the bell, because what comes next, Season 2, is built on everything we have done here. And I want you there when it begins. Subscribe now. 20 seconds. Then we finish this. Part 4. The Mirror. Who you were when this began and who you are now. I want to walk you through what has changed. Not in theory. In you. Specifically, the person who pressed play on episode 1 did not have a name for the space between stimulus and response. They knew the space existed. They had felt it, occasionally in moments of unusual clarity. But they did not have the practice of creating it deliberately. Now they do. The person who pressed play on episode 1 had 4 inner enemies operating largely undetected. The judge had been issuing verdicts for years that felt like facts. The approval seeker had been making decisions from the outside in. The resistor had been generating suffering about things that were already real. The catastrophist had been writing worst-case scenarios that almost never happened. Now they are named, and named enemies, as we said in episode 2, have less power. The person who pressed play on episode 1 did not have a blueprint for the inner citadel. They may have had fragments of it, values they held, standards they kept, moments of genuine integrity. But they did not have the architecture. Now they have the architecture, and some of the walls have stones in them that were not there 10 episodes ago. The person who pressed play on episode 1 had not yet walked through the betrayal protocol with the precision of episode 4, or applied a more fatty to a simultaneous collapse with the clarity of episode 5, or reclassified a toxic person using the 4 steps of episode 6, or commanded respect without trying to earn it in the way that episode 7 made possible, or rebuilt their confidence after failure using the 4 steps of episode 8, or asked with genuine seriousness what their life is actually for in the way that episode 9 invited. The person who presses play on episode 10 has done all of that. Not perfectly, not once and finished, but enough times that the architecture is real, enough times that the evidence exists, enough times that the transformation, however quiet, however unfinished, is genuinely underway. Look at that person clearly. That is you. That is who you have become. Not because I gave you anything, because you built it. Episode by episode, practice by practice, stone by stone. Part 5. What the complete system does when it is genuinely integrated, and what Marcus Aurelius called the final product. The 10 systems we have built are not 10 separate things. They were never 10 separate things. They are one thing seen from 10 different angles. The gap, the space where choice lives, is the foundation. Without it, nothing else works. The inner enemies, named, observed, understood, are the threats to the foundation. Without naming them, they erode what you build. The inner citadel, the 5 pillars, the 7 practices, the 1 question, is a structure built on the foundation, protected from the enemies. The betrayal protocol and the collapse system, tested in the hardest conditions available. Proof that the structure holds. The toxic defense and the respect code, the external dimension. The structure meeting the world and remaining intact. The confidence architecture, the maintenance system. What keeps the structure standing after failure? The legacy of presence, the purpose, what the structure is for, and the transformation, the moment when all 10 elements are sufficiently integrated that they no longer require conscious management. When the foundation is assumed, rather than constructed, when the enemies are visible rather than hidden, when the citadel is inhabited rather than built, when the presence is natural rather than practiced. Marcus Aurelius called this, in the final pages of Book 12, Eudaimonia, a word usually translated as happiness. But that translation misses something crucial. Eudaimonia in the Stoic tradition does not mean feeling good. It means living in accordance with your daimon, your highest self, your most genuine nature, the version of you that exists when all the performance, all the anxiety, all the approval seeking has fallen away. Not a feeling, a state of being, a condition of existing as who you actually are, consistently, quietly, without effort, because you have done the work of becoming that person. And when Marcus Aurelius writes about Eudaimonia in his final entries, he is not describing an aspiration. He is describing where he is. Not perfectly, not permanently, not without difficulty, but genuinely, as a home he has built and now inhabits. That home, the Marcus Aurelius Code, across 10 episodes, is what you have been building, and the door is already open. Part 6, What Comes After Transformation, and Why It Is Not an Ending. Marcus Aurelius did not stop writing the Meditations when he arrived at Eudaimonia. He kept writing, not because he still needed to improve, because the practice itself had become part of who he was. The nightly writing, the honest self-examination, the naming, the return to values, was no longer a system he used. It was something he simply did, the way you breathe, without thinking, without effort, without it feeling like discipline. And this is the most important thing I can tell you about what comes after transformation. It does not end. It deepens. The gap gets wider. The inner enemies get quieter. The citadel gets more stones. The presence becomes more natural. The legacy becomes less deliberate and more simply who you are. And the work, which was once effortful and now is mostly not, continues. Not because you are not yet enough, because the work is not separate from the life. It is the life. Marcus Aurelius governed Rome for 20 years. He wrote the Meditations for 20 years. He practiced the gap, the citadel, the observer position, the daily review, for 20 years. Not because he had not yet arrived, because he understood something that I want to leave you with. You have been given everything needed. He wrote that not at the beginning, not as encouragement to someone still building. He wrote it at the end, as a statement of fact about what the practice, consistently applied over years, produces. Not superpowers, not invulnerability, not freedom from difficulty. Everything needed to navigate what comes, to be who you want to be in the moments that matter, to give what you have genuinely, consistently, without performance, to the people and moments in front of you. You have been given everything needed, not someday, now, after 10 episodes of building it. The Marcus Aurelius Code, Season 1, complete. 10 episodes, 10 systems, one integrated practice for navigating what comes, whatever comes. Let me leave you with the complete architecture one final time. Episode 1, The Gap, the space between stimulus and response where your freedom lives. Episode 2, The Inner Enemies, named the judge, the approval seeker, the resistor, the catastrophist. Episode 3, The Inner Citadel. 5 pillars, 7 practices, 1 question. Episode 4, The Betrayal Protocol. Not forgiveness, not bitterness, precision, and burning the letters. Episode 5, The Collapse System. A more fatty, the 4-element system. 1 next right action. Episode 6, The Toxic System. 5 types, 5 responses. The Reclassification Protocol. Episode 7, The Respect Code. Not earned, generated. Character consistency in every direction. Episode 8, The Architecture of Confidence. Evidence-based, built from inside, maintained through failure. Episode 9, The Legacy. Not what you leave, what you give while you are here. Episode 10, The Transformation. Not learning, being. the home you have built and now inhabit. You have been given everything needed. Now 2 things. 1. Share this series with one person in your life who is in the middle of something difficult. Not as information, as company. 2. Subscribe if you have not, because Season 2 of the Marcus Aurelius Code is coming, and it goes deeper. Seneca, Epictetus, the complete Stoic system applied to the hardest modern problems. I will see you there. Thank you for 10 episodes together. This was not a small thing. Remember to be wise. Memento Sapiens. Before you close this, I want to ask you to do 3 things. The first is for you. Subscribe to this channel right now and hit the bell. Not because I need the number, because Season 2 is coming. Seneca, Epictetus, the complete Stoic tradition applied to modern life. And you have done 10 episodes of foundation work that makes Season 2 10 times more valuable. You earned your place in what comes next. Subscribe. It takes 5 seconds. The second is for someone else. Think of one person in your life, one person who is in the middle of something difficult right now. A collapse, a betrayal, a toxic situation, a confidence crisis, a question about what any of this is for. Send them episode 1 of this series. Not this episode. Episode 1. Let them start from the beginning, because what you have been building across 10 episodes, they deserve to build 2. And the third is for both of you. Leave a comment below this video. Tell me one thing that changed. Not everything. One thing. The one shift, however small, that you will carry from this series into the rest of your life. I read every comment, and your answer matters. Not just to me, but to every person who finds this channel after you and reads what you wrote. Your comment is part of the legacy of this series. Make a good one. Thank you for the Marcus Aurelius Code. Season 2 begins soon. Memento Sapiens. Remember to be wise. Trident Emblem.